Chapter 14. "I found Kasim hilarious," Yekaterina reported, plopping herself on Kenny's couch and declining his offer of grapes. "I'm stuffed. He took me to the Valley Bistro, where you had your meeting." "Our meeting?" "Your Millennium Force meeting. Anyway, it was great. Did you just love it?" "I did. And Kasim was chivalrous, full of stories, talked a mile a minute. In fact, I feel like I've just now caught that from him. Have I? Am I just talking incessantly? Stop me if I am. I don't mean to be. He wants to see me again. I probably will let him, but I didn't promise." Kenny's mind was whirling. He liked the quiet and shy cat better, and he hated that she seemed so intrigued by Kasim. But her knowing about the Millennium Force troubled him most. "The Millennium Force?" "Yes, don't play dumb, Kenny. I'm surprised you hadn't told me about it, all clandestine and skullduggery. He told me how you're pretending to be a taller, telling them that you're working undercover at COT, playing both ends against the middle. It sounds so exciting. And Kasim infiltrating in Paris? Wow." Kenny looked away and popped 3 grapes into his mouth, tucking them into his cheek. "So, he didn't leave me anything to tell you? He doesn't even know we know each other. And still he told you my business? It's his business too, Kenny. He admits he's not an official member of the Millennium Force, but he's your primary outside contractor." "Contractor?" "Well, not for money, but who knows what might come of it now that he's delivered the goods." "The goods?" "The tall manifesto. He didn't leave a thing out. Don't worry, he swore me to secrecy. Hush, hush. Yeah, that Kasim. Real tight-lipped. He thinks I would make a good undercover infiltrator, too." "He does?" "Because I look young for my age. I could tell them I'm 10 or 20 years younger and stay on the inside a lot longer." "Mm-hmm. You don't think so?" Kenny strode to the window and pulled the drapes apart, letting in the bright moonlight. "I think you're most valuable and productive right where you are. I mean, I'd rather you were working directly with me, but don't you feel as if you're where God wants you?" He heard Yekaterina lean forward. "Look at me, Kenny." He turned. "You're upset. You're taking this way too seriously. I'm not considering anything Kasim mentioned tonight. All that stuff is just fantasy. I mean, I'm impressed that he does it and that you and your friends are trying to figure ways to thwart Tall. But you're right. The best way to do that, at least for me, is to keep doing what I'm doing. I would rather lead one child to Christ than expose a dozen Tall cells. If their dying off doesn't convince them they're destined to lose in the end, nothing I say or you say or Kasim says is going to change their minds. I worry that they're affecting young people, though, Kat. Kids like you were honest seekers. Those types could be swayed." "True. So let's get kids saved early. Then these characters won't have any impact on them." "But again, Kenny, you're overreacting to this. Why so troubled?" Kenny sighed. This was Kasim's fault. He had put everything on the table, proving again that he was a loose cannon, impossible to trust, the quintessentially wrong person for the job. Kenny sat again, picking a handful of grapes from the bunch and swirling them in his palm. "I need to tell you about Kasim, but I don't want you to take it the wrong way." "What would be the wrong way to take it?" "I don't know. Maybe that instead of giving you a brotherly warning about a guy, I was just being jealous." "Jealous of what?" "Your attention." That seemed to stop her. She looked genuinely surprised. "Don't tease me, Kenny." "Tease you?" "You needn't be jealous of anyone seeming to have my attention. I've wanted your attention since the day we met." "Seriously?" "I've been afraid to—" I just figured you saw me as too young, too new in the faith, a little flaky because it took me so long to become a believer. I don't know, maybe you thought I was too immature, hadn't had enough real ministry experience. Or maybe you just didn't think of me in, those terms. Attention terms. Kenny tried to put the grapes in his mouth, but one missed and rolled down his front, bouncing off his belt buckle and rolling across the floor. Ekaterina made a move to retrieve it, which embarrassed him. He said, "I'll get it." But with his mouth full, his words sounded mushy, which made him laugh, and another grape came shooting out. Now Ekaterina was laughing, and they were on their hands and knees gathering the errant grapes. "At least let me get the one that's been in my mouth," Kenny said, and she howled all the more. Once they were both seated again, and Kenny felt the color receding from his face, Ekaterina reached for his hand. He wiped it on his pants to be sure it wasn't sticky with grape juice, and extended it. No one but his parents had ever held his hand. "Now you're going to tell me about Kasim, and then I'm going to tell you how innocently I view him regardless. And then we're going to tell each other why we're so interested in each other's attention." "It's always good to hear from you, sweetheart," Rayford said. "How's Cam?" When Chloe finished bringing her father up to date on everything and everyone, she asked if he knew Noah was on the cot schedule the next day. "I didn't know. But isn't that just like David or the Lord or whoever arranged this? Scheduling him on the Sabbath." "I hadn't thought of that. Maybe that's to keep the crowd down. Or up. If it's all right for a patriarch like that to be there, it's certainly all right for everyone else. I'd sure like to be there, and we both know your mother would. We're scheduled for Siwa tomorrow, which is more than 600 miles from you. And we don't know when he's going to show up, Dad. In his own time, I suppose. We'll sure be ready." "Well, we'll be thinking of you regardless." Kenny searched himself for any ill motive in telling Ekaterina his misgivings about Kasim. She fell silent and seemed to cloud over as he spoke. "Do you wonder about him spiritually?" she said finally. "I don't know what to think. Raimi is dubious because Kasim's conversion story is so cut and dried, and he doesn't seem to have been successful in ministering to kids at Cot, actually leading them to Christ, despite all the years he's worked there." "I wasn't going to say anything," she said, "but now that you mention it, he never initiates conversation about the Lord. It's always about him. And when there's work to be done, real work, not playing with the kids, he always seems to disappear. Carrying stuff, putting equipment away, preparing a field, you just can't find him. He always has some alibi. Like tomorrow even, I said something innocuous about seeing him tomorrow, and he said no, he was taking the day off because some special speaker is coming and he's sure it's going to be crowded. He said there'll be enough parents to help. The staff wouldn't even have to be there." "Special speaker? That's what he said?" She nodded. "I'm not even sure he's right, is he? Do you know of a guest coming tomorrow?" "You didn't hear?" "No. He didn't tell you?" She shook her head. "You seriously don't know? Can you think of one more way to ask me, Kenny? Just tell me." He did. "No, not the Noah." "Do you know another? Kasim had to know that, right? We tried reaching everyone. I'm amazed he didn't tell you. And I'm shocked he could stay away. How could he?" The entire Rayford Steel development team was traveling in a huge motor coach currently encamped just outside Siwa in the west of what had been known for eons as Egypt. It was now Osaze, of course. Rayford had taken the call from Chloe, late, making sleep impossible. He didn't want to waken the others, so he tiptoed out, slipping on his sunglasses against the moon, the light from which reminded him of noon sunshine from his former days. Rayford was strolling near the Siwa oasis when it was as if God turned the water back on. He felt the rumble in the ground and heard the movement of the springs and even a small waterfall. "What is it, Lord?" he said. "The last holdout repented? What?" But God was silent. Rayford knew well that the Creator took his own counsel, had his own schedule and agenda and clock. If it was time, and no one else had to know or understand. "Thank you, Jesus," Rayford said. "This will certainly make our work easier. Dare I ask for the freedom to return to Israel for the day tomorrow?" The sound of the motor coach door slamming made Rayford turn. Zion approached. "Ah," the professor said. "I hope that rumble meant what it did. Look at that water." Rayford told him what was happening at Kot the next day. "We're going, are we not? Surely the prince expected that when he acceded to your requests." "The Lord is not saying," Rayford said. "Should I take your interest as his blessing?" "That's on you," Zion said. "But you can be sure the rest will want to go. How about we put out a fleece? See if Mac can get us there by the crack of dawn, and back as soon as it's over, and if he can, we'll take that as divine permission." "Works for me," Rayford said. "All right," Yekaterina said slowly. "I have lost my enthusiasm for the unique personality of Qasim Marid. I suppose I know what to say when he asks to take me out again. But whatever will I do with my spare time now?" "I have some ideas," Kenny said, smiling. "I thought you might. Would you start by walking me home? I don't want to be late to work tomorrow." Yekaterina's parents' place was about 3/4 of a mile from Kenny's, giving them more time to chat. Kenny took her elbow as they walked. "I was struck from the first by your obvious passion for the Lord," he said. "Me too," she said. "I mean about you." "It's something I have to work on," he said. "How bad is that? I'm living in the millennial kingdom with Jesus right here on the throne and ever present, and still I struggle with the flesh." "We're not in heaven yet." The glorified mind and body people seem to have no distractions to their devotion. The undecideds trouble me more. Tell me about it, Kenny. I was one for way too long. If it's hard for me to be as devout and consistent as I want to be with my heritage and my work, I can't imagine what it's like for those who stubbornly want to insist on their own way. "They're easy targets for the other light," she said. "What a name for the resistance, huh? They really worship the lesser light, the way lesser light." They fell silent as they neared Yekaterina's home. She reached up and intertwined her fingers with his. "So, is it my turn?" she whispered at last. "Your turn? To tell you my first impression of you." "That's your call." "I found you courtly." "That's a quaint term, and you liked that?" "I quickly became infatuated," she said. "Is that too forward?" "Not for me. But I don't understand. We hardly saw each other after that first day." "That was all it took for me. I was so glad you didn't ignore me after that, even though we worked in different areas." "Ignore you?" "If you were infatuated, I don't know what to call what I was. What I am. I just know I want to spend a lot more time with you, Kat. I want to really get to know you." "Well," she said, gazing at him, "it seems we have plenty of time for that. For one thing, I'm going to be putting in for a transfer to a more direct ministry-oriented department. I mean, I like rec, and I've had my ministry opportunities, but I'd feel more comfortable now in an area that doesn't have Qasim in it. It's unlikely my parents would put you in my area. My mother was on to us from the first day." "Oh, how embarrassing. It showed?" "According to her. Mothers know these things. But I want to learn from you how to make reaching these kids an everyday thing." Well, Kenny said, if our relationship is going to be educational, we ought to start on the way to work tomorrow, wouldn't you say? Just tell me when to be ready, Professor Williams.